Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes, episode 31, Classrooms in Crisis. Our today's guest is Tom Neumark, who runs Maryland's #1 charter school, and he's here to call out the corruption he sees in Frederick County public schools and the Maryland public schools in general. A teachers' union in bed with the Democratic Party. Restorative justice churning discipline into chaos. Charter and homeschool programs starved of funds. Classrooms pushing politics instead of teaching the basics. This is the part that they hope you never hear. Now let's get into it. Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes. I am your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
And we have a very special guest with us tonight. It's Tom Neumark. Tom, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Tom Neumark, glad to be here, a resident of Frederick County and been doing education stuff for a long time.
Matter of fact, you're the founding president of the Frederick Classical Charter School. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's one of the biggest and most successful charter schools in Frederick County, maybe even in the state, correct?
Yeah, it's currently ranked #1 for both middle school and elementary school. So, and we don't have a high school yet. So the things it does, it's doing really well with.
And it's ranked #1, not just for the county, but for the entire state of Maryland.
Well, that's true. The entire state of Maryland. Yeah.
That's impressive. You're also part of the board of contributors for the Frederick News Post. You've written for the FNP.
I have.
Yeah, I've got some feelings about the FNP, but we'll leave that aside.
they have a bias, right? Like clearly,
this is what kills me, Tom. Okay, they call me up and they asked me to subscribe to their newspaper, and for the low price of, and they give me a quote. And I said, listen, since you're mostly an advertising venue, shouldn't you be paying me to take your newspaper?
Right.
Shouldn't you be giving me a couple bucks to take your newspaper and spread the advertisement that you make 99.9% of your revenue at? It doesn't seem fair to me. You know what I'm saying?
100%. Yeah, I think we're all owed money just for knowing they exist.
Also, I see that you're a visiting fellow for the Maryland Public Policy Institute. Could you explain what that is?
Yeah, so I write nerdy things for them about education policy, trying to provide advice and recommendations based on research on anything from how to do reading correctly to the problems with having a teachers union that does what it does.
That's awesome. And you said nerdy things, so that fits right in with Ethan. But I'm actually a nerd too. I just don't look as much of a nerd as Ethan does.
Everybody's got an identity, right, these days.
Correct.
So there you go.
Correct. Well, he's the brains. I'm the front man. I'm the personality. Ethan's the brains of the operation. So that's why we got to keep him around.
Right.
Absolutely.
What serves a purpose.
So on a serious nature, let's talk about schools and the state of our public schools, especially here in Frederick County, which we all live in. And then there's Washington County and Carroll County as well. But let's address Frederick County first. What do you see as the state of being for the public schools here in Frederick County? What's the grade on them? How are they doing healthy wise?
Oh, not so well, unfortunately. If you look at academics, just take math, for example, 75% of the kids fail algebra. It never used to be that way in Frederick County. If you go back 4 years, it still wasn't great, but at least it was only 50% failure rate. So still less than half were passing, but now we're well beyond that. So we're kind of headed the way of Baltimore City, where we're really not doing well. We spend a lot of money every year here in Frederick County, almost $1 billion every year. And that's just in the operating budget. Plus there's tens of millions more in capital. So, and then we've got the issue of parental rights, right? Where, parents want to raise their kids according to their own values and beliefs. And Frederick County is not so interested in that. If your child wants to have a secret about their gender identity, you're never going to know here in Frederick County. They get to keep that secret with their teachers and not inform the parents. So really controversial stuff here in Frederick County, unfortunately.
And that's codified under the blueprint for Maryland, correct? I mean, the Frederick County Public Schools has enacted that policy from blueprint. Parents do not need to know what most parents believe they have a right to know.
Well, it's not in the blueprint, but it is in another document called the Maryland Comprehensive, Comprehensive Guidance, I think, on health. And it's included in there that you should keep secrets to supposedly be more supportive of kids that are struggling with their gender identity. And of course, we all know that that's the opposite. The way that you provide the best support is to involve the parents. But unfortunately, the state of Maryland's decided otherwise.
And one of the things that we've talked about, this was on a previous podcast, but there was a law that was passed last year year, and I forget the House bill number, but we referenced it in that podcast, where what it does, it actually mandates that public schools can send children to mental health services during the school day, so taking them out of their math classes, their English classes, and can then send them for mental health services without, and it specifically says this in section 10, without parents' knowledge or consent.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate. And I haven't read that bill directly, but I know the reference to it. Frederick County, interestingly, did do something well recently, which is they took that law and they added policy around it to say that parents have to consent here in Frederick County. So hopefully more counties will have that common sense provision. But it's amazing to me that so many people in the legislature think they know better than parents. Some of these people are not parents themselves, and they're willing to take away the rights that parents have. Which is really unfortunate. Is the ones that are parents, right? Do you want anyone to, as a parent, would you ever try to direct someone else in how they raise their child? I would hope not, but some of these folks want to.
Oh, they absolutely do. And as a matter of fact, we did a previous podcast on this, and the teachers' unions are adamant that parents don't belong in education, that they're not professional enough, they're not educated enough. Talk about, academic elitism, trying to tell you that you don't know enough about your own children to raise them properly. Let the schools do it for you. I think Mao in China, he had the same philosophy, as a matter of fact.
Hitler, a guy named Hitler, had the same philosophy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, these people call us fascists.
But there is this weird thing in the left where they really feel like the parents are the enemy, right? And it's become more pronounced here in Frederick County. So we have actual Democratic socialists showing up at Board of Education meetings here with their banners and everything. I mean, it's not just, accusations of Democrats being so far left that there are socialists. These are actual socialists who are part of the Democratic Socialists coming and saying these sorts of things, that you have to keep these secrets from parents.
The Democratic Party is bankrupt for ideas, Tom. I mean, they're bankrupt. They have no ideas. Yeah. So what are they doing? They're actually embracing socialism and communism like it worked anywhere on this planet ever, anywhere.
Right.
Well, this one's going to be different. Yeah, sure. That's exactly what they said in Korea and China and, in Russia. Yeah, so this one's going to be different.
That's what they've been saying for the 110-year history of socialism all over the world. This time is different. 110 years later, dozens of countries. Guess what? It has never one time been different. You mentioned a couple moments ago that the budget is increasing dramatically, and yet the academic performance continues to plummet.
Are we talking about the budget for Frederick County or overall Maryland schools?
Well, Frederick County and both. Yeah, it's equal but true with both. So what it is that with the budget increasing dramatically, take Frederick County, for example, but this equally applies to the state overall, the academic performance has dropped. We went from being, I believe, in the top 25% just 6 years ago to now in the bottom 50%. You are a particularly good authority on this, considering your record with the classic charter school. So as someone who has defied that trend, what is your explanation for why this is happening to our schools, despite the vast sums of money that are being added to our public schools?
Yeah, there's a bunch of reasons, but it starts with the education schools, the people that train people to be teachers, right? And they are very interested in idealistic ideas about teaching and learning that don't work. So, for example, for decades, they were teaching teachers in all across Maryland to use what's called balanced literacy, where kids are asked to guess what the word is based on the pictures on the page. So if it's a picture of a cat, you don't sound out CAT, you actually guess. So that was what they thought was the state of the art, and it wasn't. We've known for decades and decades that is not the most effective way to teach reading, but that's how they wanted it taught in education schools. So these teachers come out of school thinking they've been taught something, but they've actually been mistaught how to teach. And the same for math and science and everything else, all these trendy approaches. So you take these trendy approaches that don't work, then you take the interest in achieving social equity and equality and all these types of things, and instead of looking at the instruction, they look at, well, it must be the kid's home life. It must be this external circumstances. That's why the kids aren't learning. It's not that, we avoided teaching phonics so when the kids don't memorize their math facts. That couldn't have anything to do with it. It's all these other social things. And so they've been looking in the wrong place for a long time. for the solutions. That's actually one thing the Maryland Blueprint got right, got a lot wrong, but they got the scientifically based reading instruction correct. So parents had advocated here for decades in Frederick County begging for this. They told us we were unprofessional. We didn't know we were talking about, these are the best practices. So this January, they started changing their tune all of a sudden, saying, oh, well, those best practices from before, which were not best practices, they were failing, we're changing those to do scientifically based reading instruction, for example. And it's all because the blueprint now mandates that thing, which is one thing they got right. So again, a lot of it's the instruction, just trendy stuff in instruction. And overall, the culture has just shifted, right, to the kid is always right, and the parents are wrong type of mentality, and kids have to be protected from their parents. There's a teaching as therapy mentality, I think, among a lot of folks in the public schools.
And from when you talk about that kind of the changes in academic performance, what is impressive with coming from you, right, which is one of the reasons why I'm very excited to talk to you, is that as a result of the Classic Charter, you have a record, you have a history of defying the odds. And one thing that I think it's important for viewers to understand is that the charter school are public school students picked by lottery. So you yourself are dealing with a true cross section of Frederick County students, and yet your school is not experiencing any of this. And so when you talk about what the reasons are, you actually have lived it, and there's a record of you accomplishing it. So I just want to emphasize that for a moment. But so when you talk about the teaching as therapy, that's another thing that when you mentioned that is very strong, it seems like, is that the one of the policies that the teachers union managed to put through during this Blueprint for Maryland's Future bill, which really is just a collection of laws put together that they called the Blueprint, is that it really gives an emphasis to teaching not as a way to prepare children for adulthood, not a way to prepare children for the workforce, but as therapy. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, it's this mentality that says that our teachers must have trauma-informed practices, to mention one of the many buzzwords that they have, which assumes that every child has experienced some trauma that requires essentially a non-punishing type of approach to school discipline, where you can't actually do suspensions and expulsions. In some cases, they'll actually encourage things like restorative circles, where if you've been bullied, you and the bully and a teacher go talk and try to work out what happened there. And sometimes it's like you're actually trying to dig into the bully's trauma that might have caused them to bully you, which is crazy. I mean, kids shouldn't be called on to be therapists, and
then the victim of the bully is sitting in the room listening to all the attention go to the perpetrator instead of the victim.
Yeah, and trying to help the person that bullied them figure out why they did it. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. But these are known as restorative practices or teaching as therapy. And the problem is that when research was done on this, the headline of the research claimed that it worked. But if you actually read the data, it didn't show that it worked. And so a lot of folks that I find in education will read literally the headline, say, oh, here's a best practice. Like, well, did you read the rest of the report? Because it actually said it didn't work. But the headline made it seem like it did. And so that's been one of the challenges of education, not only for discipline, but for reading and math and everything else. A lot of folks are just not doing their homework, quite literally, not even reading the very reports that they cite that they think are in favor of something. If you actually read them, very often they are not.
I know restorative justice, or whatever they're calling it, is definitely one of the reasons cited by many teachers who are leaving the profession. Lots of friends that are teachers. Many of them either are retiring or cannot wait to retire. One of them, she told me, she said, when a child had a major behavioral meltdown in class, I used to send them out. They would get a suspension.
Yeah,
now they come back with a snack bag. Yeah, they come back with a snack bag and an attitude because they know they can't be touched.
Right, exactly. And a lot of this was due to the Biden and Obama administrations that passed a law. Biden in particular was particularly bad. That there was a law that was passed that basically said from the federal level, even if we think that your practices are fair to everybody, regardless of demographics, if your outcomes show that more kids that are minorities or whatever were punished more frequently, even if that's justified, we can see you anyway. And so what happened was these school systems started shifting to these restorative practices so that they wouldn't be overly punitive.
Yeah, just to emphasize what you're saying, because that's kind of cataclysmic. What you're saying is that so the previous or two administrations ago, what they stated is that irregardless of the fact that you're doing everything right, that you are being factual, that you're being fair, that
Right.
what you're doing is correct by every measure,
Yep.
if the outcomes are different, where groups that we say shouldn't have X amount of penalties applied against them, if
Right.
the outcome is that those groups are getting higher levels of discipline, then
Right.
we are going to punish you, the
Yes.
teachers, you, the school system.
Yep, issued in January of 2014. That was from the U.S. Department of Education. It was a Dear Colleague letter, which is generally regarded, even though it's not a law, to have the effect of law. And it introduced what they call a disparate impact framework, which does what I just said. It says even if your policy doesn't mention race and it's implemented in a fair manner, you could still be penalized. But certainly the system itself could have received penalties and, some kind of sanction from the federal government. And in 2019, Maryland embraced all this restorative stuff, right? There's HB 725, which encouraged but does not require the use of restorative practices. A lot of districts don't realize they still do have an option, even though Maryland is saying, well, we want you to do it, but they themselves are not giving you any penalties if you don't. So you could still have traditional discipline if you wanted to in a district.
My guess is it breaks down by county, and the county, it breaks down on the red and blue lines for
It
actually whether you use restorative justice or old-fashioned discipline.
Yep, 100%.
I'll tell you, the biggest solution would be if you bring the nuns I was raised up with, you bring them into school with some of them rulers. I guarantee you, the only timeouts that'll be asked for is by the kids. Time out from this
Yes.
whooping I'm getting.
Yes.
And that's coming from Mark, who is a Boston-raised Catholic
Irish
Irishman.
Catholic. The nuns were, I'll tell you what, I got a great education.
Catholic schools are doing really well, and they've pulled off some miracles in places where low income, folks that are going to Catholic school are achieving amazingly high rates. And I think we need to really look at more school choice. Under the Trump bill, there is a provision to allow you to deduct $1,700 off your tax bill, off the final tax bill, not your adjusted gross income, but your actual bill at the end.
Wow.
If you donate to help poor kids go to private schools, you can deduct that $1,700. But it's never going to happen in Maryland unless Wes Moore agrees, and he does not look like he's agreeing. So other states are going to have this wonderful tax benefit, but probably not Maryland unless something changes here.
So do you think overall Governor Moore's administration is supportive of charter schools and homeschooling, or do you think that they're creating barriers?
Oh, definitely creating barriers. They have no interest. The Maryland State Department of Education was going to underfund charters at a rate that had never been seen in Maryland before under the administration, under Governor Moore's administration, pulling back 25% of the allocated funds, which is huge, because we weren't even getting the full amount we were supposed to begin with, and they're going to take more away. So there's still lawsuits all across the state on this. We're still waiting on a disposition from the appeal to see where we end up. But charter schools historically have only gotten 68% of the funds that they should get, and so now we're going to take from that even more, which is hopefully going to not pass.
And yet the charter schools are still outperforming academically their public school neighbors.
Yes. Yeah. So Frederick Classical, we get an 85 to 90% algebra passing rate. So vast majority of our kids pass, compared to a 75% failure rate. Oh, and by the way, we're more diverse than the regular public schools at Frederick Classical Charter School. So, that's the other excuse they love to use is, oh, well, you're just not diverse enough. Nope. We're actually more diverse than you, and we do better than you. What we do is we teach math a sensible way. We have a smaller number of topics per year that are truly taught to master. You have to master the material. And we instead of having 100 topics you barely understand, we have maybe 10 to 12, and you really get those. And that's how Singapore, the nation of Singapore, teaches math. And we actually use a a program called Singapore Math. That's the exact same program they use in the nation of Singapore. And so I've said for years, why doesn't every school in Maryland just use this program? You can buy it here. It's in English, right? There's a US version of it. Buy it and use it. Clearly it worked for us, but there's not a lot of interest in it.
So what you're saying is that the secret to your charter school is that you guys simply use proven curriculum that has been
Right.
used for decades or generations even,
Hmm.
and you simply say, wow, this is successful. Our children should benefit from this as well. You're
Yep.
doing that, and the public schools simply are not.
They're not. Exactly. That's it. There's
Wow.
no magic here. It's just you doing things that have been proven time and again to work. And it's like the old story about the drunk guy that's in the parking lot. Somebody happens upon him, and he's there at the looking under where the light is. And what's going on, sir? Well, I'm looking for my keys. Oh, well, where'd you lose them? Oh, way over there on the other side of the parking lot. Well, why are you looking here? Well, that's where the light was. I thought it'd be easier to look here. It's like doesn't make any sense, right? Public schools are like that with curriculum instruction. They've been doing the same stuff that's convenient to them for years and years and years. They don't want to look anywhere else to stuff that actually works. But if they just would, they would realize it's less stress on teachers. These traditional lessons are easier to implement. They work better. They scale better. By scale, I mean it's one thing to have one school that does well with Singapore math, but you have a whole nation of Singapore that does well. And if you look across the country, these schools that are using Singapore math are typically outscoring the other schools. So it's a no-brainer. But again, public schools are not interested in something that didn't come from their set of progressive ideas.
Well, that's the administration. I know the teachers definitely want changes. I
Yes,
know
they
the
do.
teachers' unions they're bleeding members. If
Yes.
they don't have collective bargaining and teachers have to become part of these unions, they're leaving them. They don't
Yep.
trust them anymore. They don't
Yep.
believe in them, and they're definitely leaving them. There's a teacher crisis in
Yep.
Frederick County and all and across Maryland because of these very reasons. The administration does not support their teachers, and the teachers know it.
And
Yeah,
when it comes,
and they're looking at independent unions now. A lot of people don't know you can still be part of a union. You can still have those protections, but don't be a NEA affiliate, so the National Education Association affiliate, or the AFT affiliate, the American Federation of Teachers. Those are the ones that are pushing all the progressive nonsense into our schools. So you could just disaffiliate. Lots of folks have done this, and you're seeing a trend more and more for districts doing this. It takes about what is it 30, I think it's like a third of the teachers have to vote to do it, and then you disaffiliate, and you can form a local union that actually doesn't send all your dues money to the national office where you're paying for their heat and their president's $500,000 salary. You can actually keep the money here locally. And then the other thing teachers can do too is there's a group called the Association of American Educators, which provides you with twice the professional liability insurance that that you would get through the union, and that does so at 1/3 of the cost. So it's up to you, teachers. But I mean, do you want to pay more money for less insurance coverage and be part of a union that doesn't support your views and is highly political, or do you want to, save money and actually focus on making the schools great? To me, the choice is clear. But a lot of teachers, I don't think, realize they have that as an option.
And that's a big thing that I think that people are starting to become more and more aware of in the general public. But still, there's kind of there's a lack of awareness, and not just a lack of awareness, but a desire almost to not want to accept the fact that there are people out there who are making a living off of creating a public school system that is failing our
Mhm.
children, and that the entity that is doing that is primarily the teachers union. If you think of the fact of where do all of these policies that you and your charter school have rejected that are leading
Yeah.
to these great results, you're basically rejecting the teachers union. Like, that's really, in a sense, your secret is that you
Yep.
just operate free of the teachers union's influence. Do you have an idea of why the teachers union is like this? Why is this what they stand for? These issues of violence and chaos and lack of education in the schools that parents have been coming to school boards in tears talking
Yes.
about now for 5+ years.
Yeah, exactly. And we are as free as you can be in Maryland. I will say that. So every other state but Maryland allows charter schools to have non-union teachers. We actually don't get to have our own employees. They have to be members of the union. Everywhere else, you hire your own employees. Now, if those employees want to start their own union for your local charter, fine, but they don't typically because they're pretty happy there compared to a regular public school, so they don't feel the need to. So I did want to point that out. We're the only state in the union, in Maryland is, that makes it illegal for a charter school to hire their own employees, which is crazy. But the reason, to get to your point, Ethan, is that the reason that we're like this is they're largely a political organization, and it's interesting. They're there to push political views, and the Democratic Party these days is basically an appendage of the teachers union, if you will. It's not the other way around. If you look at the number of delegates that go to the Democratic National Convention, they typically are the second largest number of delegates. The state of California is number one, and the teachers union is number two. So this is what this is all about. They have a lot of interlocking progressive groups, and the teachers union is kind of at the heart of it. And again, they're just political. They're not. They're basically getting all that dues money to run their progressive campaign, against our kids and against the system and the citizens. But I think people are starting to wise up to it, so that's a good thing.
The tail is wagging the dog.
Mm-hmm.
That is a way of saying it.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane.
Our thanks to Tom Neumark for shedding light on the politics, bias, and misplaced priorities damaging our schools. But this conversation is only half the story. In part 2, we turn to a crisis that reaches beyond Frederick County, the rising violence and sexual assaults in Maryland classrooms. It's an uncomfortable truth, but one every parent and taxpayer needs to hear. Like, follow, and share for more content like this, and join us as we continue the discussion in part 2 with Tom Neumark.